And we begin with the front lines because right now this is the main argument in all negotiations. Putin is using time to intensify the offensive, and the situation on the front line is becoming critically difficult. By the end of November, the Russians managed to capture more than 700 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. Here are the key points of their advance. Vovchansk in the north of Kharkiv region, the Siversk area in Donetsk region, which the enemy is trying to encircle from two sides. Mirnohrad is almost completely affected as a result of the fighting for neighboring Pokrovsk. Walk the field, the enemy was approaching almost to the outskirts of this city in the Zaporizhia region. But there is good news, says our military correspondent, Andriy Tseplienko. The center of Kupiansk, whose complete capture the Kremlin so loudly announced, is now ours. Additional forces were deployed here, and the center of the city was cleared of occupiers. But the problem of Russian drones remains common along the entire front line. They have turned the frontline zone into a continuous area of destruction, more than 20 kilometers wide. We will now talk about our troops' tactics in this situation. Also, in this episode, we want to help the 47th Mechanized Brigade, Magura. The soldiers are defending our country in the Sumy region. Meteorologists are forecasting a warm winter, which means mud and difficult logistics. So the soldiers need ATVs. They will not only deliver ammunition, but also help evacuate the wounded. That's why every 10, 20, or 100 hryvnias you donate using this QR code is a chance to secure a position and to stay alive. Because what the soldiers of the 47th are doing at the front right now is already becoming legendary. About Alexander Pavlov, who held the defense alone in complete encirclement for 61 days. Watch Andriy Tseplienko's report now.
Drones are changing the front almost every day. The larger the so-called kill zone becomes, the less often you see armored vehicles on the battlefield. Such powerful Bradleys and other armored vehicles are becoming attractive targets for Russian drones. And this is one of the reasons why the classic front line as we imagine it has turned into separate pockets of resistance between which Russian occupiers are trying to infiltrate. In such a situation, every position is worth its weight in gold, even if there's only one rifleman left holding it.
Talk to you. It's probably time for, well, not a poem, just a bit. The sun came out and got a bit stuck. Here, under this situation, damn, they truly won't leave us alone, but it is absolutely nothing. We will certainly break through.
Russian assault troops are surrounding Alexander Pavlov, a soldier of the 47th Brigade. He was holding the defense while being completely encircled. Food, water, and ammunition could only be delivered by drone. His comrade went to retrieve such a package and was killed by an enemy strike. And the infantryman was left alone, face to face with the enemy horde.
This position could not be abandoned because it was the gateway to the next settlement. Friend, you have to stay, you have to hold out, they told him. He replied, at least tell me for how long. Approximately it will be for 3 to 4 days. He said, I understand, I will hold on.
He held that key position for 61 days. The battalion commander had to make tough decisions, either risk his soldier or let the enemy advance.
He couldn't determine how many enemies were around him because sometimes the distance between him and the enemy was as little as 10 meters.
The very first one, I mean, he climbed into our firing position, something like that. He was probably a sapper, but he just blurted out a couple of words and I realized it was bullshit. And the first one, exactly that bastard, the one I saw. As for the ones I already took out, I don't know, I didn't see their faces. These damn apartments. Here at the old Russian lady's place. Someone is calling him. They're still watching, maybe someone else will show up. And
the second one appeared soon after.
When he realized it wasn't his, he quickly unlatched it. You see, he's holding the cartridge from the chamber by the barrel with his hand. That's it, I'm disarmed just standing there. I acted on instinct right away. This is a gift for my brother-in-arm's 45th birthday. I hit him somewhere here, below the collarbone in the chest.
As soon as the situation allowed, 2 Colombian volunteers set out to rescue Alexander. Unfortunately, one of the Latin Americans, having reached the Ukrainian brother-in-arms, received a fatal wound. He managed to celebrate his 35th birthday at the position, but he couldn't make it out.
Did you celebrate his birthday at the position?
Yes. We toasted with coffee, but he didn't make it. 4 days.
In the Sumy direction, when the intensity of the fighting subsided a bit, the 47th managed to push the front line forward. Only after that was Alexander able to make it back to his own.
I look into his eyes and I just realize there's already emptiness there. That person has already seen everything there is to see?
A wound at the position often becomes a death sentence. Only a ground drone can offer a chance to survive. This is how the 47th Brigade, with the help of a drone ambulance, evacuates as many as 3 of their wounded at once. They all survived. Robots are becoming a strategic advantage, especially when there are no other ways to provide logistics and evacuation. Here, the 3 regions of Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, and Zaporizhzhia converge. There are more fields and steppes here than in the north, which means fewer chances to gain a foothold and hold the defensive line.
This direction is difficult not only for our brigade, it's challenging overall. Why? Because the enemy has chosen it as the main direction. It's the junction of 3 regions, and accordingly they are constantly increasing their efforts here.
The enemy managed to destroy the logistics and push through the Ukrainian defense several kilometers deep. One of the Ukrainian units was unable to hold its positions. To save the situation, part of the 92nd Brigade was urgently sent here.
Oh, guys, this is your job. These are
The stabilization tasks in this direction. We're handling them quite well. The enemy, they've already felt it. In some areas, without going into specifics, they have indeed been stopped. They've suffered losses, and we're trying to regain what was lost.
Regaining lost positions in the steppes at the junction of 3 regions was possible not least thanks to these kinds of unmanned platforms. Robots give people more confidence. They know they won't be left to bleed out.
As soon as we started working, we immediately received requests to evacuate people. And we encountered the fact that we were able to reach right up to the line of contact, but
That means it's possible to keep holding positions, fortify them, and even move forward.
in just about a month we managed to evacuate around 5 or 6 people, and they were evacuated right from the line of contact.
One of these operations by the Unmanned Ground Systems Company lasted as long as 14 hours. 7 of them are tracked robots. The Termit was hiding from FPV drones.
We drove up and unloaded. We're looking to see what kind of foot traffic there is. I'm dry, and literally right where the narcotics guy was standing, a minute later, a shell landed there.
The first strike. The Termit withstood it and continued on its way. There are countless Russian FPV drones above it. And not only that, a lightning strike hits nearby. But the drone keeps following its route, and the wounded soldier seems to have nerves of steel.
Bore.
Yes, I hear you.
I hear you. What was that?
We ran over a grenade.
14 hours after the mission began, the wounded man finally reaches the medics. Another soldier's life has been saved.
Logistical operations. They're less visible, but that's water, that's food, that's fuel, that's ammunition at the positions. This is the strengthening of our defense and theoretically even increased support for our offensive.
This is the Race Pro platform. It has just returned from a mission.
It covered about 100 kilometers in a single night today. It transported 800 kilograms of cargo, specifically for our guys.
The Russians don't really care about the fate of their expendable soldiers. They're perfectly willing to sacrifice them to find the spots where the Ukrainian defense might collapse.
They might send just 1 individual across the field, or they might send as many as 10. They might deploy a single vehicle, or perhaps 2, even 2 of these specific cars. There have even been documented cases with large cargo trucks, such as the well-known Zils or Urals carrying 20 infantrymen standing proudly on top, riding on the vehicle itself.
I hope they didn't make it.
No, all of them stayed right where they were supposed to.
What are their losses?
2, 3, or even 4 times higher. I'll speak for my battalion. God willing, it stays this way. We currently have no losses.
This is the Shkval Battalion, formed from former prisoners. A risky experiment that the 92nd Brigade considers a success.
Back in the winter of 2022, lying on the ring road in northern Saltivka near Kharkiv, I said, give me a company of prisoners, and tomorrow I'll take Tsirkuni. But a little over 2 years have passed. They overdid it. They gave me a battalion, but I only asked for a company.
A complicated contingent. But unlike those mobilized through the military enlistment office, here everyone is a volunteer, so they made their choice consciously. In the current situation, with a shortage of motivated fighters, that's an advantage.
There were even participants who faced an enemy 3 or 4 times larger, and the enemy ran. They had only heard about what kind of guys were coming. The enemy dropped their weapons and ran through the fields.
These 2 fighters have serious injuries. They can no longer go on assaults, but they found work in air defense. The battalion decided to create a mobile fire group. The first such group in Ukraine was formed from former convicts, and now the guys shoot down their first Shahed drone.
It turned out that it was an enemy drone. It bypassed us, then made a loop, started heading toward us. The group reacted quickly. The target was identified through the night vision scope. We shot it down, destroyed it.
Shkval also trained its own crew of UAV operators. The first among similar battalions in the system. A mandatory requirement is that operators must first serve in the infantry to understand where the enemy hides.
Well, because everyone is limited, and everyone has already been hit 5 or 6 times.
Severely wounded, suffering from injuries, and in distress.
Well, if we know how to camouflage ourselves down below, from now on we'll be looking for them. From above. Let them be surprised!
Will they be surprised? I
am convinced they will.
At the moment, the guys from the 92nd have eliminated one of the breakthroughs.
We only lose when we ourselves start to believe it. And us, it's very hard to make us believe that. Almost impossible.
But the front line is 1,200 kilometers of active fighting. And right now there is a critical shortage of such motivated fighters everywhere to cover every kilometer from the threat of a breakthrough. Andriy Tseplienko, Oleksiy Osavchuk, Kostiantin Kaluhin, Alexander Klinin and Serhiy Perfilov. TSN Week 1+ Marathon. United News.
The only thing that can change the situation and gives us hope is our success deep in the rear of Russia. And now, any move Putin makes is a response to what Ukraine is doing, not to anyone else with their half-hearted sanctions. It has reached the point where our successful operations are already influencing the global oil market, says our Alexander Zagorodny. His arguments are coming up in just a few minutes. Meanwhile, friends who have become enemies and enemies who are now called friends. This is how a stunned Europe perceived the new national security strategy announced by Washington. And although, in the case of Trump, showing outrage is ineffective, that's why European leaders publicly remind him that Europe is the closest ally, not a problem for the states. Meanwhile, across the ocean, voices are already being heard from those who privately express the real intentions of Trump's team. For example, Elon Musk went so far as to say that the European Union should be abolished altogether. Against this backdrop, President Zelensky is already flying to London tomorrow to meet with the leaders of Britain, Germany and France. Well, what else can you do? This week, diplomatic battles over the war in Ukraine unfolded on 3 continents at once. TSN.Tyzhden correspondent Irina Prokofieva will tell us more.
Black cars with diplomatic license plates. One after another, they drive up to NATO headquarters while it's still dark in Brussels. Out of them step the heads of diplomacy from the alliance countries. Professional smiles, but in their eyes there's a worry that can't be hidden from the cameras.
Putin is threatening Europe again. How can you comment on this?
I truly hope this unfortunate event won't happen in the future, but let's take it as a truly significant and serious warning indeed.
Russia is and will remain a direct military threat to us.
We will not accept any new Yalta.
The meeting here, like the speeches, was planned 6 months ago. However, everything had to be rewritten because of the so-called peace negotiations that were simultaneously taking place on 3 continents. Miami, Brussels, Paris, Moscow, Dublin. Planes carrying delegations were shuttling back and forth across the ocean in search of justice or peace for Ukraine. At the moment, these 2 concepts have nothing in common. In the state of Florida, where the sun always shines, it is raining on the day the Ukrainian delegation arrives. Secretary of State Marco Rubio jokes, "Unfortunately, the United States can't control everything." However, not so long ago, the chief diplomat of the United States was also unable to control the peace plan for Ukraine. Of the 28 points that the press called Russian and were hastily rewritten in Geneva by the Europeans. It was with this plan that the Ukrainian delegation arrived in Miami. Rustem Umerov displays optimism in front of the cameras.
We are discussing the future of Ukraine, Ukraine's security, the prevention of further aggression against Ukraine, Ukraine's prosperity, and how to rebuild Ukraine. And we thank the United States and their team for their efforts to help.
However, body language cannot be hidden. Photos from this meeting have circulated in the world media. Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kyslytsya's arms crossed over his chest, a dissatisfied expression. Steve Witkoff, Mark Rubio's interested gaze. This round of negotiations lasted about 5 hours, and during it, the United States tried to convey the Russian position to the Ukrainians. The defense forces must withdraw from Donbass. Ukraine, however, insisted that such a scenario was impossible. These adjustments to the plan. The next day, Special Envoy Vitkov will present them in Moscow. The unchanging Kremlin guide Kirill Dmitriev leads the esteemed guests to a restaurant, treating them to caviar, kolodets, and quail. And also posikunchiki. The name itself is a kind of culinary trolling for the Americans. Together they stroll across Red Square, and only in the evening do they meet with Putin. Special Envoy Vitkov smiles warmly for the cameras, unlike in the photos with the Ukrainian delegation. To add at least a bit of objectivity to this atmosphere of enchantment, Vitkov's 5 hours of negotiations came to an end around midnight. And judging by Russian sources, they turned the United States from a moderator of the talks into a courier for delivering Putin's words.
Something provoked criticism from us, and the president also did not hide our critical and even negative attitude.
But the willingness of the White House administration to play the role of a courier for Europe is now truly unacceptable. Putin did not like the security guarantees for Ukraine approved by President Zelensky and the European coalition in Paris. There, in particular, they discussed providing Ukraine with everything necessary on the battlefield, Europe's place at the negotiating table, and the frozen Russian assets, as Putin has already threatened Europe with a new war. The Allies have a lot to discuss, but the issues of supporting Ukraine and Russian aggression against our country, as well as Europe, must be central. This is how Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, described the meeting of the foreign ministers of the alliance member states. Europe cannot agree to a new Yalta and the redrawing of borders by force. One after another, NATO foreign ministers are making similar statements. Standard concern has grown into a full-fledged fear that Europe's future security is being decided here and now. And Putin wants to end the war to his own advantage. And this is clearly noticeable in the headlines of local newspapers. Ukraine simply doesn't leave the front pages. This is a satirical magazine. I'll bring it to Kiev as a souvenir. This is the reputable French newspaper Le Monde, and here, on the front page, there's a full-spread article about whether Donald Trump's plan is working or not. I don't know French, but someone kindly agreed to translate it for me. It says here that Trump's plan still hasn't been adopted because the Europeans don't like it. Moreover, the prospect of living under the new Putin-Trump rules frightens not only people in high positions, but also ordinary Europeans. In the center of Christmas-time Brussels, I discuss newspaper headlines with a couple from the UK and a Belgian named Emile.
There are threats for Europe as well, not just for Ukraine. We can no longer live under the illusion that everything is fine.
We need to be very well informed so as not to fall under the influence of fake news. But we are 100% behind you. We are stronger with you.
I don't feel optimistic, but rest assured we are with Ukraine in our hearts.
National governments must listen to these simple voices from the streets, and so must the Ukraine Council. NATO is competing to declare their support for our country with money and weapons.
Everyone feels the critical nature of the moment and the need to take practical action right now. Not tomorrow, not the day after, but today in order to stabilize the front. And we are shifting the Ukrainian position, namely that there can be no compromises regarding Ukrainian sovereignty.
Sybiga's mention of sovereignty is not accidental. After all, this is one of the security elements that the Ukrainian delegation is discussing with the Americans and which Marco Rubio emphasized. One of the elements of sovereignty is that Ukraine determines its own path, including the path to NATO. At the moment, Washington is hearing this, but for how long? Especially considering the White House's willingness to destroy everything that has kept peace in the world until now. The absence of Marco Rubio in Brussels, the very place with the greatest opportunities to discuss the contours of peace with European allies, was noticed by everyone. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte even tried to reassure the press, which was eagerly asking whether this should be seen as a démarche by the US from NATO.
He is working very hard on the peace process in Ukraine, so I think it is entirely acceptable that he is not here.
However, this optimistic response was clearly undermined by the publication in Der Spiegel of transcripts of a phone conversation between the leaders of Ukraine, Finland, Germany, France, and the NATO Secretary General.
The US is playing games with you and with us.
We must not leave Ukraine and Volodymyr alone with these guys. I agree with Alexander that we must protect Volodymyr.
A day later, the White House published a new national security strategy on its website, in which the goals of the United States directly contradict those of NATO. After all, restoring diplomatic and trade relations with Russia is a priority of their national security. So, at the very moment when the European part of NATO is preparing to defend itself from Russia, the United States is getting ready to befriend it. Moreover, the US wants to bring democracy to the EU, claiming that it has supposedly disappeared there. In addition, according to Bloomberg, American officials have started pressuring Europe by blocking the distribution of frozen Russian assets. The EU capital has already come up with a plan B. They are planning to issue Eurobonds there. And Orban, of course, is against it, but there is a way to bypass him. And another piece of good news is that by the end of the year, Europe will provide Ukraine with weapons purchased from the US under the Pearl program. NATO General Mike Keller also expressed hope that it will be extended in 2026. We
do not see any impact from the negotiations, so the flow of materials, especially from the United States, has been ongoing continuously since the launch of the Pearl program in August. And I do not expect any changes in this in the near future.
Despite all the complexity of the negotiations, Donald Trump does not give up on the idea of putting pressure on Ukraine.
The document is still evolving. Yes, there are the most sensitive issues. These are put in brackets, left for the leaders to decide.
Which specific points these are, the Ukrainian diplomat did not say. However, it is obvious that these are questions of territories and elections. But why is Putin so relentlessly striving to gain every meter of Donbas and so persistently pursuing the elections? So if the Vitkov-Dmitriev pact succeeds, Zelensky may become the last president who speaks on behalf of all of Ukraine, which includes Donetsk and Luhansk region. All subsequent ones will be elected without the votes of Donbas. And the Kremlin dreams of capturing such a reality. And the United States is ready to accept a world where borders are won by force. From Brussels, Irina Prokofieva, Volodymyr Paraponsky. TSN Week 1.31. Marathon. United News.
Well, for now, let's talk about how Ukraine is gradually becoming a regulator of the global oil market. Yes, don't look so surprised. Well, what can you do when the President of the United States himself refuses to enforce the oil sanctions he announced, the ones most painful for Russia? This week, the US postponed restrictions against Lukoil's foreign gas stations until the end of April of 2026. So the Russian oil giant, despite the sanctions imposed the day before, will calmly continue selling fuel for another 5 months. And that's a fact. Europe's reaction? The European Union and the G7 are preparing a complete ban on maritime transport of Russian oil. This became known this week. But while our partners are still hesitating, and as we know, they think things over thoroughly and for a long time, the defense forces of Ukraine have imposed their own maritime sanctions. And they were so painful that Putin immediately started threatening to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea. What exactly happened and how we responded to Russian attacks this week, our correspondent for TSN Week, Alexander Zahorodny, will tell you.
There's going to be an impact now. So what? That's it. Bang.
In the past 2 weeks, Ukraine's defense forces have carried out the largest and probably the most successful strike on the strategic enterprises of the aggressor country.
See, the chemical plant is burning.
Nevinomysk Azot is one of the largest chemical enterprises in the world. To understand its size, let's take a look. A segment from Russian television.
The territory of Nevinomysk Azot is enormous. It's like a separate city. It's very interesting to visit it. But not everyone gets such an opportunity.
But good drones got that chance. They flew in and struck.
They blew it up. There goes the smoke.
The military say it's a very lucrative target. Besides fertilizers, this plant also produces acetic acid and ammonium nitrate. Thousands of tons of components for explosives. The plant will not be operating for some time. In recent days, good drones have also visited the Ryazan and Syzran plants. Oil refineries.
You can see the smoke. This is what's happening here in the morning. Why did I even come here?
The port in Temryuk is also getting hit, and Kadyrov's pride is taking a bit of a blow too. The Akhmat Regiment base and Grozny city. This week, the most powerful power plant, the Kostroma Thermal Power Station, was also hit. Its capacity is equivalent to 4 nuclear units, power units.
The Kostroma power plant is the pride of Russian energy. It is one of the largest power plants in Europe. It produces 3% of all the electricity in the country.
This week, the drone operators of the main intelligence directorate's special unit Ghost managed to reach it with their UAVs. Several combat aircraft, including a MiG-29, were destroyed in Crimea, as well as heavy drones and radar antennas. But all these successes pale in comparison to the attack on the port. Novorossiysk. Drones managed to destroy the remote docking device of the equipment that allows oil to be loaded into large tankers. The Russians plan to repair these installations in a year and a half. And because of the Russian tailor, they export a little more. 2% of the world's oil. At another time, gasoline prices could have spiked all over the planet. But not now. This has already been checked by expert Serhiy Koyun. The price of oil in the world remains stable and low.
In fact, believe me, everyone in the world is just waiting for Russia to cut its production because there is too much oil. Including American companies and Saudi companies. They will simply outpace the OPEC countries. They will replace this Russian export very quickly, and no one will even notice. That's why I think there are far more people in the world who want that export to stop.
Do they have anywhere to put the oil?
No, there's nowhere to put it.
But only a few drones managed to reach Novorossiysk, which the enemy has fortified from the sea and the air. And that's why another way was found to block Russian oil exports. Tankers. Here's how the strike by unmanned boats on the vessel is described. A Russian captain in a radio interception.
Thank God the people are safe. We were heading to Novorossiysk. We were attacked by unmanned boats and immediately lost communication. We might need it. Emergency towing.
Strangely, Russia's Shadow Fleet tankers are being hit all over the world. For example, like this one near the port of Dakar. This is West Africa. There were 4 explosions on the oil tanker Mersin, on the outside of the hull. Water got into the engine room. The crew was unharmed, but the vessel was partially sunk. It is unknown who carried out the sabotage. Military expert Ivan Stupak has already counted 10 ships in the world's oceans that were transporting Russian oil. And now they are either burning or sinking. Oh.
There's no need to hit Novorossiysk. You can strike at a weak spot. And we saw a very wild reaction from Putin. If these are pirate attacks, well, all of this has already happened. We'll cut them off. Yes, we'll cut them off, we'll bomb them. Oh, that means it hit a nerve, even though we've only just started. We haven't really done anything yet.
There are almost 1,500 tankers in Russia's Shadow Fleet, but there are only a few dozen owners. And some of these businessmen have already stated that they will not work with Russia. It's dangerous and very expensive. And it's not just about the repairs themselves. Regular insurance for even the smallest tanker costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. But war risk insurance multiplies everything by 10. And then there's the crew, who refuse to sail on a ship with a target painted on its side. Idle time for a tanker like Avdotia also means losses. That's millions of dollars not earned.
When the market gets a signal like tankers being blown up, it simply means just stop. Accordingly, this is a very powerful move. And honestly, yes, this is what sanctions should look like.
Unlike gas storage facilities, there are no natural underground oil reservoirs. By the way, the Russians' tanker fleet was serving as storage. Russians are running out of places to put their oil. Some of it, of course, they'll ship to ports on the Baltic, some to the Far East, but that won't solve the problem. There are 2 options. Either shut down the wells, or sell oil so cheaply that it covers all the risks for the owners of the Shadow Fleet. Previously, there was possibly another option. The Russians could escort tanker caravans with warships from the Black Sea Fleet. But it is either at the bottom, like the flagship cruiser Moskva, or it does not leave the bay at all. Novorossiysk. As strange as it may sound, but now it is Ukraine that has become one of the real global regulators of the oil market. Well, who would have thought, right? Gradually, Ukraine is joining the list of countries that influence the global oil market. Through the port of Novorossiysk, we are already controlling the transportation of a bit more. 2% of the world's oil. That's not so little.